Hey guys, welcome to the Good Podcast. And in today's episode, I've got a lovely interview lined up for you with Julieanne Steel from the company Unclutter Your Life. Anyone who has listened to this podcast would have heard me talk about the idea of minimalism, decluttering and simplifying our lives and how I've applied some of them into my life. So it felt like it was a really good time for me to sit down and to talk to someone who's a professional declutterer. And that's exactly what Julieanne is. She goes into people's homes. She really helps them to get a great understanding of why they're hoarding and what's the root cause of it, and then help them to clear the spaces up, and so they can sort of like feel free of that burden of too much stuff. And I think we can all relate to that in different ways, whether you just got a full cupboard full of stuff or you've got things stacked everywhere, and it's starting to understand why have we got these things. So we delve into a lot of this, and Julianne's got great experience herself, and from the outside looking in, had the perfect life, yet on the inside it wasn't. She wasn't feeling like she was living the true self, and in a way, she was just living the life that other people had sort of projected onto her. But she managed to see this and to transform it. So this episode has got all about her story, but just really delves deep into how we can all start to embrace the idea of simplifying and to uncluttering our space. And she's got loads of great techniques. She's got some brilliant book recommendations along there as well. So we start off by Julieanne talking about the news and the negative effects it can particularly have, and the negative side of journalism and all that, and how we want to shift away from that and start to see the brighter side of life. Let's get into today's episode.
I've not tended to pick up the newspaper because it's often felt really negative, like negative reporting, and a lot of it's about getting reader drama, and I kind of like to hear sort of like positive examples of it's been a struggle, but let's hear what happened after that. Was there a positive outcome apart from the kind of like doom and gloom? I think for me, I find that a lot of people are interested in the kind of downside and the kind of when things are going bad for people, but hearing happy news and positive stuff is maybe not comfortable for people.
Yeah, and that's exactly what my aim is with this podcast, is because there's so much good happening in the world, and if you just switch on the news and that's where you're getting your information from, then it's going to be very limited, and also it's going to put you in a negative mindset, and you're going to think the world's a scary place when actually it's not a scary place, and there's so many amazing things happening all over the world. Yet it doesn't get the attention it deserves. So I aim with this is to speak with people who things that I'm interested in, like for instance feng shui and decluttering and simplifying your life, which is what you're doing, and sharing that message, because I think it's got a lot of value, and it's also very empowering for people. When people start to make changes in their life and they see the effects, it really lifts you, and you can see that actually I'm the one in control. Of course, we've got a lot of baggage and trauma to release at times, but we don't have to play the poor me card as much anymore. We can basically feel like
and that change is inevitable, and it's not something that a lot of people feel comfortable with, and that really is at the heart of a lot of my clients in terms of their stuckness, and this kind of living in the past, and not being able to transition into the present and into the future, and living out the past, and it's really about the kind of the deep-rooted fears about making changes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've had a lot of changes in my life personally, from a very young age. I would say that things have been constantly changing, and they were constantly moving, physically moving, and in terms of moving house quite frequently as I was growing up, and also moving in my sense of finding out who I am and where I fit in. And I was trying to think about how my childhood and my family life now reflects the work that I'm doing. And I think I've been processing like where I came from and where my sense of belonging has been for a long time, and what I attached to that really along the way. I mean, I come from a working class family, and I hadn't really thought about that, and what that means in terms of how I'm perceived. And it's more recently I've thought about the kind of attachments that people, and sort of labels that people put on you as you're growing up, or on your kind of your upbringing. So I came from a working class parenting, mum and dad, really, my dad's a greengrocer, really hardworking, not educated, didn't do further education, didn't go on to university, and my mum the same. But then I was kind of given quite a middle class childhood, sort of from around like the age of 10, and it kind of like it evolved naturally. So the hard work and the kind of financial gains that came with my dad's endeavours, it gave us what I would then kind of reflect on as a white middle class background. So, I was sort of taken from the East End, where I was born and where my parents grew up, to a much more sort of affluent area, and given, and then a different type of education. So I was given initially a private school education, a traditional sort of girls' school, and then which really didn't feel like it fitted well with me, and there was a bit of an internal struggle, but sort of I'd been to a local primary school, growing up in a kind of quite a multicultural area in East London, and then moving to a predominantly white, wealthy place and school, and I didn't really feel comfortable. And then I left that school and I went to another private school, but a performing arts school, and then that sort of transported me into a whole different kind of arena of people. And this kind of feeling, so with this came a house move, several house moves. Prior to that, there were several other school changes as my parents began to move from an area, which I look back now as a mindset of bettering. When people better themselves, it's like, what does that mean? As a child, I didn't really connect with what that meant, but now processing that, it was this way of gaining a bigger home, an area where people were of like-minded mindset, education, but I didn't know if I fitted in either or, in either the kind of coming from working class roots, or then being in this kind of like this different realm of like, our house became bigger, we had more luxurious holidays, the car got updated, and we were surrounded by people of a similar lifestyle, and then I think about how you know, what I tried to emulate as my own family life when I, you know, became married and sort of went into adulthood. And I think what I, at the time in my 20s, thought was successful in terms of a successful life was linked to what I could show people, you know, what materially it looked like. And I think honestly that I've really struggled with that, and not really knowing where I belonged. Did I belong in this camp, or did I belong in a place where things really looked really successful, but they didn't feel it? And I think that was probably a time when I started to reflect about what has meaning and what is meaningless. And then the meaning, I started to question whether having, you know, this kind of really on top, or what was on top, really looking like a great life of success, it felt quite meaningless. I think now, as an older, as I've got older, you know, like in my late 40s now, almost 50, I've really gone around sort of like in a full circle, because how I'm living now in terms of looking successful, it may be questionable whether living in a small, you know, in a small flat with, you know, a regular car, and being single, and, you know, being self-employed, that is that successful? And it is to me, because it feels like a very much more authentic place to be. So it feels like I've taken what I needed to see and what I needed to kind of what I thought it might look like, based on my own upbringing and my own childhood. And as I became to feel more authentic, I realised that a lot of the things that I had in my life were actually making me feel quite burdened, and quite hard to achieve, you know, to maintain, to keep them up. So I think that kind of was I don't know if it was a crunch point, but I think my inspiration for doing the work that I do actually came out of a moment of desperation. It was a financial fear that I'm newly divorced and I have 3 children, and what am I going to do that will enable me to live financially, to you know, to be able to do things, but also how am I going to do that with purpose? You know, what is my purpose? And I don't know where I read this, but I think the night before I went to sleep and then woke up, you know, in the kind of witching hour, was that I'd been reading something about purpose, and I think it may have been like the beginning of the year, like January, February time, when people start thinking about their goals, and I just remember thinking that I needed to write down, you know, what it was that I actually, what have I achieved? What are the things that I'm good at? And how can I link them into some kind of work? And I've always been fascinated by people, by people's characters, and how that reflects in the things that they do. And I think and I've been a very deep thinker. So from like a really young age, like around like 4, both my parents used to say that they would notice me kind of withdrawing, and just sort of sitting and gazing out the window on a car journey, a very sort of silent, kind of solitary way of for a young child. And I think the deep thinking has been about trying to make sense of people and like how human beings are living and interacting. And that was from a very, very sort of a small sort of child. And I think when I went into the drama sort of side and the performing side of my young life, when I went to stage school, again, that was about being able to be somebody else and understanding what it's like to be somebody else, and why we're all so very different, like what's kind of like the link between us all. And I think that I was looking for a purpose and searching for that from a young age, so that the material side of my life just wasn't going to kind of cut it, that there had to be something more. But the more that people had in terms of their stuff and their kind of attachments, the more people didn't seem to be happy. And it kept on coming back, that thought. And I resonated, because I thought, when I had the most in my life, I was probably the most unhappy. So the process, I think, was about not taking everything away, but certainly taking and removing some of the layers of attachments to things, and seeing what was underneath it. And that is probably one of the hardest things that I find in my work people can't do, is they see the immediate physical clutter, and it's an outward manifestation of the internal clutter. And they initially get in touch with me to kind of remove the kind of external distractions, like seeing, messy surfaces and overflowing wardrobes and inbox emails, just kind of like building up. And it's usually the external things that initially people want to just to look at and either put into order and organized, or actually completely, get rid of, but then when the work gets really interesting is when you get into the emotional fears and the emotional attachment that people have to the idea of themselves and what they are supposed to be, and how and where they're supposed to kind of fit into society in terms of status, and it feeds a lot of different types of clutter. It feeds into kind of aspirational clutter and ego clutter and sentimental clutter. And I think fundamentally what most people get to the root of themselves is that deep down they don't feel good enough. They don't feel worthy enough. Somewhere from way back, to the kind of early first years of life, is they're seeking a connection and a relationship with, which is, very much a part of how we come into the world, is that's a given, that we're seeking a connection and a relationship. But along the way, most people come up against situations where they're criticised, or they're in a situation where they're not, their needs aren't met on lots of different levels, our fundamental kind of home life is often reflected on in the clients that I work with, and that sense of being really, really deeply loved and accepted for who you are, as you transition, you know, through to kind of the teenage years, and whether that, because you didn't receive that validation, that outside of yourself there's this need to create something which basically covers up your insecurities, and it is very much a part of, if you see somebody and, you know, they're on the outside looking like they have the kind of trimming of a successful life. I mean, one of the classic kind of comical male kind of ego clutter is the size of the car that you drive, or the kind of branded label of the car that reflects that you've done well for yourself, and sometimes that's the only thing that a particular man might have to show for his worth, and it's so outward, and it's such a visual expression of the ego and the kind of status symbol that reflects. And there's a book called The Man Who Sold His Ferrari. I don't know if you've ever read it, but it's a really interesting book. That the kind of clutter industry as it's evolved is actually quite female currently, but a lot of us, and particularly myself, are coming in contact with, so a lot of other professional organisers and declutterers are coming actually in contact with a lot of their clients being more male than female. So I think that's really interesting, and I'm actually working with two different men at the moment, dealing with very different aspects of their clutter, but they have both reflected on these kind of deep rooted feelings of not quite being enough, and then what they have gone on to do in order to create a person of enough, you know. And that's been very reflective in their lifestyles, and also in their sadness. You know, not feeling like they've achieved a level of financial security, maybe not having achieved, you know, a really successful relationship with another person, and that's on the increase. And also this feeling of emptiness, a kind of stagnant energy that rests within them. It's really difficult to hear how depression has gripped men in the last decade.
Yeah, and if I can just step in there from the male perspective, and it can feel like from such an early age that it's kind of imprinted that you have to go out in the world and then you have to be successful, but then you also need to provide for the people around you, for your wife, for your children. You need to be holding things together. And then also there's the other side of it, where you're saying, the worth can only come from what that external looks like. Yeah, from my own perspective, no matter what you've got, it's never enough, because there'll always be someone with a fancier car than you. There'll always be someone with a prettier wife. There'll always be someone with a nicer wardrobe. And it just means you're just on that constant hamster wheel. And it's so exhausting. It's so draining. It's so damaging for my health. And when we get, as you touched on early on, a lot of it's just all rooted in our conditioning, but rooted in our ego. And the ego will never be satisfied, because it will always see something. But as you're saying, and as for my own experience from the past few years of really decluttering my life, once you start to let go of them things and you realize that them things are just papering over the cracks, and until you let them go, then you can only really start to see your true self, and you can maybe begin to work on your true self, because you can see what's underneath it all and maybe why you're doing it. You're doing it because of a traumatic childhood. You're doing it because of, anything and everything. So it definitely becomes this self-reflection for us all. And it's great that you're saying that more men are taking an interest in this now, because it's a right time for it.
Yeah, I think this split as well between families, which splits a financial pot into two. And I think that sense of not being able to look beyond that. And I think essentially the connection between people is fundamentally what I believe we all are seeking. But when there's a split, unless we look at what that the split is and how it's affected us just as individuals, not as part of a couple, or even, parents that kind of have a split from their children in divorce situations, unless we actually work out what went wrong and our part in it, we won't go on to achieve good connections in the future. And I think particularly men are feeling at the moment the pressure of having to do and be everything. I mean, equally women can, I think we're in a bit of a women's kind of movement at the moment where we're kind of feeling more held in terms of our place in the world. And I think men aren't feeling as supported. And unfortunately, because of divorce, men often find themselves very solitary. Women mothers will usually retain the family home, and often the children on more of a full-time basis. So there's like a real hole in a man's future. And from the recent clients that I've had, this kind of this sort of hole becomes an actual hole, like a dark hole that they go into, and become very reflective of what is the meaning of life, what is it all about. Sometimes the pressure of having everything actually drives two people apart in a relationship, because they're focusing on getting more, having more, being more, looking more successful. And that pressure, I know I felt, we both felt during our marriage, which kind of changes you as a person. It changes your well-being, your physicality, the tension and the stress and the pressure, and often this kind of like overdoing. You said about being on a hamster wheel, I really resonate with that. Just keeping going on and going on and going on, and losing sight of actually what the meaning is of being together, because it feels like the pursuit of happiness is about possessions. I personally feel that the less I have, the more richer I feel. So my riches have come from within, and my life has been more enriched because I have had less financial bars to reach, to maintain, by having a more manageable size home and a less expensive car to run, and less clothes to make decisions about in the wardrobe, and more opportunities to be spontaneous. And I've had more time to think about what is my priority, when I'm earning money, and it's an opportunity to think about how do you spend that. And I reflected for myself that I wanted to be working and fulfilling my purpose, not to have more money to buy things, but to buy experiences, to have the opportunity to have an education, which I didn't have, So I've kind of bought myself my education now, later on in life, in more of a traditional sense, because I feel that will underpin my work. So I'm training, currently in training to be an integrative psychotherapist or counsellor. It could, the path can go either way. And I've come to it I think I've come to the party quite late in life. But
you may have come to it, perceived to be come to it late, but there'll be many people who, you say, you're in your late 40s now, but there'll be many people who wouldn't have made that shift when you made that shift, and they'll still be living that life because they feel like they have to keep on going with stuff. And
yeah, and I think interestingly, sometimes people don't have the choice when they change it, because something comes along like a wake-up call and forces them to make a change. Like divorce forces you often to relocate. You may lose your home, your income may be slashed, you may have to go back to work, you may have to change your work to adapt to your new family dynamics, or you get sick. Often people, the wake-up call is that sense of when your health becomes a danger, or really there really isn't anything else, because without your well-being and your health, you don't really have very much else. And when I say about well-being, I think your mental well-being is your most fundamental building block to the rest of your decisions that become important in your priorities. Without that mental well-being, that sense of knowing yourself and accepting yourself for where you are now, that is a really good place to start from. And sadly, we are gripped in the last, I think probably the last 5 years, since hoarding has become a recognised mental health disorder. Hoarding, a more extreme, very, very difficult mental health behaviour to really unpick and unravel, and it can begin as being chronically disorganised, which is usually because there's been some trauma, some disconnection in your life, personal life, working life, losing a family member, or losing a sense of yourself through circumstances or through illness. And I think since around 2014, we are really facing, and I'm sensing a lot more people are recognising that they have depression, and that they have anxiety, and where that sits in the body. And then the manifestation of that is that you have an ailment of something. Something comes to you as a sign that you're not in line, you're not aligned with your true self. And there was one amazing book that I was introduced to nearly 30 years ago, which I always come back to around affirmation about being good enough and feeling good enough, genuinely feeling well, is the book by Louise Hay, which is You Can Heal Your Life. And I came across that in my late teens, early 20s, and I had absolutely no idea about the connection between thought and action, and how that manifested itself in the body, or that the sense of stagnant energy that comes from kind of really not doing what you want to be doing, that kind of stuckness. And when sometimes I talk to clients and they say, I just can't seem to get going, I'm procrastinating. And then when we have a session and they get really quite angry because they're like, why couldn't I have done this? Why could I not have just cleared that wardrobe out? Why do I need you to be here? So there's like a sense of frustration. It's like, and I relate that to when you really want to do something and you look at your kind of list of priorities and your daily schedule. We've all only got 24 hours in a day. Nobody is more privileged. It just is a given. But how you prioritize those 24 hours and what is on top, what is your priority, is what you really, really want to do. And I feel that when people are stuck in all these different areas of their life, it's really about getting truthful and transparent with what do you really want to do. And if you're not doing it, the question is, why are you not doing it? It's because you don't really want to do it. A simple kind of vision that I'm thinking of, or is coming up to me, is that when there's a massive pile of ironing, it's like, well, why is the ironing so piled up? Well, deep down, I don't really like ironing, so I don't really want to do it. So it's accepting that, okay, if I don't want to do it, it's not going to go away. I've either got to pay somebody to do it and then free up my time to do what I really want to do. Because, when we feel tired and de-energized, and then someone suddenly says something, would you like to, to come and, join my photo shoot? And suddenly you're energized. And it's like, yeah, I really would like to do that. So literally a moment ago, I was feeling so tired and so kind of like stagnant and not being able to get going. But the minute you tap into what you really want to do, suddenly there's your energy.
Yeah, like magic.
Like magic. Really, that is such a brilliant thing to say.
So it's always there, isn't it? The energy is always there within us. It's just, yeah, we're not getting excited. As soon as you get excited, that seems to be a bit of a key for me. And at a level of excitement, it lifts you. You're like, yeah, of course I'll do that. It just pulls you along.
Yeah. So then when people feel stuck with everything else around them, it's about breaking down those areas of their life that is stuck. I mean, just looking at somebody's wardrobe, and having loads and loads and loads of clothes, but actually not liking any of them, and not and saying you've got nothing to wear.
Yeah.
So sort of being maybe not really identifying with how you want to look, and that might have changed from 10 years ago. That wardrobe may not reflect your life now. It may not reflect your work. It may not reflect your style. It may not reflect your age and your shape. And And some of that's about accepting that, you know, as we get older, we change, our skin color changes, our figure changes, our hair changes, and that it's time to kind of get back in touch with, you know, who am I? How do I want to look? You know, does this wardrobe need revamping? Am I looking at all these clothes and I don't want to wear any of them because they don't really truly reflect who I am? So the areas of stuckness, everything's energy, we know that. And I think that getting back in touch with that is about removing what is in the way, which is often big kind of what may seem like mountains of clutter. It could be commitment clutter. It could be that you've really got so many commitments, obligations and things that you've committed to doing that you don't really, really want to do anymore. You want to come off that committee. You want to stop being, you know, on the parent-teacher association. You want to maybe reduce the commitment that you have to friends. You know, that circle of friends that maybe people have moved on. Maybe they've outgrown each other, you know. But you feel obliged to kind of always answer the phone to somebody that you know that friend is going to drain you.
I think there's another element into it all as well, which is feeling like we have to do it all ourselves, and that weight. And I think maybe you touched on a bit of a male thing where you said, you know, like they would come round and it took you to help them to clear the wardrobe. And I think there's an element of feeling like we have to do it all ourselves and we have to take everything on. And actually a big part of this is being open to asking for help and being vulnerable and accepting that. Why not ask for help? It's not a weakness. In fact, why not lean on other people's skills?
Yeah. It's really true, Rob. It is a real strength to, I mean, we had mental health day yesterday. Nobody can do it all on their own. I mean, you know, if we go back to being very, very primitive times and look at like packs of animals and people, you know, the hunter-gatherer, there's parts in all of us that we bring together as a team so that we create more of a wholeness to our lives and I think one of the things which clients often take a long time to accept is that they need to have some kind of accountability, but there's not a shame around that, being accountable to somebody to get you started, to help you, to support you. You know, it's like, you know, I'm not good at technology, and you know, if I want something done to my website, I need to get in touch with you know, Jack, who can do it really quickly, and that helps me because I can't be all things to all people. In anything, in my work or in a relationship, and this feeling of doing everything on your own is quite crushing.
And exhausting as well. True, absolutely exhausting.
Yeah, exhausting. And it's exhausting thinking and looking at how life looks when there's so much to do, or there's so much there that is in front before you get to, you know, the kind of real meaning.
So I'm interested to hear then about how does it go about if someone gets in touch with you and to arrange a consultation to work with you? What's the process? How does that work?
I always like to speak to people on the phone without any, without them feeling that there's any obligation to kind of to book a session, because I think it's really important that they feel that I'm the right fit for them, and also that I can work with the client. So it's really, it's talking first, just sort of establishing how and why they found me, and whether they're in, you know, kind of an actual sort of crisis mode right now, or whether it's something that they're thinking about doing and changing. Maybe it's post, you know, a redundancy, or the death of a loved one, or divorce or debt. And then I always go out to see the person in their environment. So going to their home. I mean, which is it often people will cancel just before. It's that fear of opening up, being vulnerable, opening up your life, your home, to somebody that's, you know, potentially going to inspect, you know, the kind of the layers. And then that time in the house, seeing how they are in themselves, you know, body language, tone of voice, a sense of being comfortable or uncomfortable, is a real indication to seeing where might be the right place to start, if they want to start, and getting started is the challenge. Once that kind of first initial fear is overcome, the beneficial feeling of just clearing one, it could just be one drawer, honestly, or one surface. I went to a lady's house. I've been going there for a couple of weeks, and we've just been talking. It's just sort of been the talking therapy side of the work. And then I was just thinking, okay, we're the third session now. Will we could we consider, you know, looking at an area of clutter, and what how could we change that? And she said, oh, I'm thinking maybe you could clear my desk. And I thought, wow, this you know, this is really, something's changed, something's shifted, and it wasn't a very big desk, and it was categorized and admin that she'd hidden away beneath other papers and unopened post and other things that found themselves on the desk were kind of had come to the surface. There was an order, there was paper rubbish that went out, and she sat in the chair and she said to me, I can't tell you how happy I am to see a clear space, and to feel that there's some plan to my day now, that, you know, things, I found things that were missing. I know now that I've got an action pile, and I've got stuff that can be tossed out. That's, you know, that's done, that's finished. It can be shredded, and but it took a couple of times, I think, for her in particular, to trust, you know, to kind of trust that she could handle it, and that there was going to be some benefit to you know, to kind of looking instead of ignoring, you know, making the change. A lot of it's about bringing things to the surface, and, you know, a lot of people talk about procrastination and, you know, what that actually is. And it does steal your time, you know, putting things off. It does steal your time, and it steals your energy.
It definitely steals your energy, because if you think about it, something might only take you 5 minutes to do. It might be one, I need to change that light bulb. And it's only literally going to take me to get the ladder out and put it up. I can have it done in a few minutes' time. Yet it could take months. And you think, and it's there, it's on your mind, and it becomes a burden, doesn't it? And then that becomes a block, and then other things just get added on and on and on. So it might have started with the light bulb, but then before you know it, there's 50 other things on there, and you feel completely overwhelmed. And it's like, that's
actually a big area of clutter in a lot of houses, is unfinished projects, just small, like you say, a couple of minutes, like you need to put a battery in something, and you think every time you go to use that, but let's just go now and like, you know, get the battery out and put it in, and it's going to work. But it's what's in front of that. So I think this kind of habitual discipline that you have to make with yourself about your day is actually really important, because if you have become free with your time, things beforehand would need to have been put in place in order to feel that freedom. For example, I have the same kind of daily ritual in order for my day not to run me, and I run it. So like, I always do these I call it the daily steely, and it's literally like, I took my kind of like my surname Steel, and I thought that's a really strong kind of word that kind of means that something is like structured and strong, and it works, and it holds something up. And I was writing just writing my name out, and I thought, okay, how can I make that work for me? What is my sense of steel when I wake up? What is going to hold me up for my day? So I put down, S is for swiping the surfaces in my house, you know, just quick surface swipe, put stuff away, you know, put the hairbrush back where the hair stuff belongs, and, you know, so it was like, okay, S is for swiping the surfaces. And then I thought, okay, T is I'm going to take the rubbish out, because if you don't take the rubbish out or the recycling out, you know, it builds up, and then it's like, you've just got to empty that bin. You just got to take it out. Then I thought, okay, what could E represent? And I thought, well, I need to always make sure the sink is empty, like the dishes are washed up or the dishwasher's emptied. So that's a given. That really helps the day to run smoothly. E, again, edit my post. Open the post. There's no point not opening it, because it's got to be opened, and it's a daily thing. do the laundry, put the wash on, do that laundry, because if I don't do that laundry, it will then be like 5 or 6 loads to do at the weekend, when I don't want to do 5 or 6 loads. And the last one was like, yay, you know, like some kind of yay moment, a yoga pose or something, just to kind of like, yay, you know. It might be yay as in I'm just going to take a moment of mindfulness. But with those things in place, with that daily ritual, I then have time then to do these kind of little jobs, like put that light bulb, change that light bulb, or just fix something that kind of is irritating. But without those fundamental kind of daily things done, those kind of daily chores, for me, it gets out of hand.
Yeah, I like them. It's nice that you've got them as your, as you say, your daily rituals. And what it seems to be, it then gives you, when you do that, and because you're not letting things build up, it then gives you the space to space in the mind, but then space around you physically to then do the things that you want to do. You don't feel burdened because, like we said about the light bulb, it's the same thing. It just pops in your head, whether it's, oh, I need to empty the dishwasher, I need to empty the dishwasher, I need to put the rubbish out. But if you just do it automatically, you're not worrying about
discipline. Yeah. I mean, if you look at the kind of, you know, if you look at a Buddhist monk, you know, we might think he's got nothing to do, but he's got a daily ritual, or she, as a Buddhist, somebody who follows Buddhism, you know, there's a daily ritual to centering yourself so that you're ready to take on, and you know, those kind of things like are my priorities, and they're going to be very different to other people. But I know that some of the basic kind of like daily disciplines, you know, like you get up, you think, right, get in the shower, wash away the energy, the stagnant energy from sleep, brush your teeth, wash your face, have a cup of tea. You're ready, aren't you? And I know when I haven't done that, you know, and I'm all for having like pajama days and things like that, and you know, having that kind of real downtime. The productivity of my day is definitely different by how I approach it, and by how I think it's like you sort of 6 a day, keep the clutter away, you know, kind of, you do this stuff to kind of underpin so that you're free then, and you've created the space then to do what's really important. You know, like if you've eaten your 5 or 6 or 7 a day, you've had your kind of nutritional fixes, you've set yourself up nutritionally, you've given yourself energy to complete, you know, bigger things, you know. But all of that, I think, is very hard to achieve if what's on top is very weighted and very dense. And often, you know, I think I said a bit earlier on about, you know, the kind of physical clutter that's in the way. That's a point where, when you clear that, it mentally frees you. You know, emotional clutter and mental clutter. When you're not seeing the physical clutter, there's more space for you to look deeper into the kind of root causes.
Just on that, it's interesting. It's one of my things that I wanted to talk about is, what advice would you give, or in terms of like when people have done all the decluttering, they've done it all, and they get energized from doing it, and everything's ordered, and they've got the rituals. But what about the point when maybe they're not then doing what they could be doing with the time? Maybe the decluttering, the cleaning becomes a little bit of an obsession, and it's just, I don't know, it just goes in a bit of an endless loop.
I don't advise people to become too fixated about keeping things ordered. I think I advise people to have a designated place for something, and for it to be returned there. So kind of like the maintenance, the kind of when everything's in its place, how do you keep that up? I mean, people say to me, you know, the volume of the things that you have, the excess is always an indication of how hard it is to maintain something. So if you had 4 toothbrushes and you were trying to put 4 toothbrushes back in the toothbrush holder, and the toothbrush holder, you know, just won't take 4, so therefore 2 have to lay down by the side of the sink. It's then about examining the excess, and the reasons why you feel that you may need to bulk buy toilet rolls, for example. So the kind of, it really taps into the fears about, like, the feeling of lack, the, you know, the opposite to the feeling of abundance. So I think if your volume of things that you like and you need is of a manageable level, when something is moved and, you know, it needs putting back, if there's not too much, it will easily just kind of find its way into that drawer. And it doesn't mean that inside that drawer everything has to be, you know, in this kind of like, I'm going to use the word OCD, but I don't really like that word, but it's coming to mind as, you know, you put something back and it has to be facing upwards, or, you know, so that the label is visible. And that actually is not how my house looks at all. For example, you know, shoes go in the shoe cupboard, but it doesn't mean that in the shoe cupboard every shoe has to be put in a sort of a way which creates perfection. And I think that would be a thought not to be thinking about, trying to create perfection in terms of managing clutter, because for me, a perfect home is one that feels relaxed, and, you know, not one where if one small thing is out of place, you know, there's this anxiety. So I think being aware of the volume of something in particular that you keep, and I mean, if you're somebody that has, you know, lots of hobbies, I think it's important to, like, say for example, a hobby then has a subscription attached to it. Maybe your hobby's fishing, or and you know, you subscribe to fishing magazine. having the awareness of when you receive information, that you accept that in the magazines, those articles, you know, you've read them, what you needed to know, you know, you've already digested it, you've absorbed it, and maybe there's a few articles that, you know, you could pull out that like really important, but the rest of the magazine kind of, you know, you could let go of, and possibly, you know, just have one file of the articles that, you know, you've kind of torn out that are things that you really want to do. It might be, you know, a fishing location, but the rest of the magazine, you know, kind of really is not useful. So it is constantly revisiting how you're living, because what's important is having what you want to own, and that it has a meaning for you. It's purposeful. It has a meaning. And I don't know if you've experienced living on your own and then living with somebody else and then sharing a space, that then becomes very, very important.
Just on that, from my own experience, like often in a relationship, it's one person who kind of sees this information first, maybe goes on a bit of the self-development route and they explore different things. And then, for instance, decluttering, it can be quite a challenging thing. Yeah, you can sort some of your stuff out, but if there's shared things, it can be, there's a bit of negotiation going there as well, because it's their space as well. So it's honoring that, but also realizing that, you know, and you feel the home will be in a better place if you start to look at it. Do you ever come up across maybe some of the clients where maybe the husband isn't interested, but the wife wants to charge on?
Very much so. And interestingly, the expression bringing your baggage, you know, to a relationship is literally a physical baggage as well. You know, we're bringing the stuff from our previous life, our previous relationship, our childhood, to a shared space, and a level of irritation can very much be present. I mean, I'm working with a family at the moment, so I'm working with a family of conflicting attachments and their own sort of personal take on, you know, what belongings matter, and it is a challenge. I think what you said about honouring our partner or the person we share a space with, honouring their past. I mean, interestingly, women seem to hold on to more attachments, particularly in a family situation. I don't know if it's a maternal sentimentality of being, you know, attached to things that the children have had and are now grown out of, and it's that sense of the children growing up and you know, their role as a mother changing, so trying to hold on to still some of that, and it is a work in progress, but I do like to see the whole family that I work in a home with. I like to get a sense of, you know, the teenage bedroom, you know, the hobby room, you know, maybe the man shed, the loft space, the areas which as individuals, they've wanted to reclaim a piece of the house that essentially is for them, you know, and then I think it's really important to be aware of volume, and this kind of, I mean, particularly with teenagers, you know, they are flooded with, you need to buy this, you know, if you're not buying this, then you're not good enough, or you're missing out, or, you know, you're not popular. And unfortunately, you know, we're living in a kind of a very materially kind of driven by social media and advertising world for young people. It's very hard, you know, when parents are saying, you know, we can't keep up, you know, and I was in a lady's house recently, and there was a huge sideboard, floor to ceiling, of box games, and the children have grown up. They're still at home, but they've grown up. And I said to her, how do you feel about these? And she said, I feel really nostalgic, and I would love the teenagers to come out of their rooms and we sit down and play a box game. So she felt a real sense of attachment to what she wanted in the family space, and what was actually happening was that the teenagers were in their bedrooms with the door shut on their iPhones, and they didn't want to engage. You know, one of the grown-up teenagers says, just get rid of them all. We don't play them, Mum. It was really difficult. It was really difficult to hear. So the sense of honouring, you know, the children are saying, we've grown up, that's for kids. We don't want to do that stuff anymore. You know, we don't want to sit around playing box games. And Mum was I'd really love to have that time back. So the successful scenario is that I asked them if they could each look at this huge pile, and did one of those games evoke like a brilliant memory, or, you know, a really awful one, and they all picked out one. So Mum was happy with that.
I wonder if they've been playing them again yet.
Well, interestingly, I did notice that the lid was off of the game Guess Who. So I don't know whether the two old grown-up teenagers had been playing it together. I didn't get that far in asking, but I thought it was a sign that that compromising mutual space, but also just something I've thought of is that when you go to a house and there's been a breakup or a sadness around a relationship, and there is no space in that house for somebody else physically to kind of be part of. It's interesting when, you know, someone says, I really want a relationship, but there's actually no space in the house for a relationship to fit into. So it could be in their actual schedule, you know, that they're so busy that, oh, you know, I don't have time to date, or to kind of make the effort to see somebody. But also, do you have the space in your in your bedroom, for example, for them to physically be there. You know, does your wardrobe have a space for them to hang their clothes if, you know, they're going to be staying over, having a sleepover a couple of nights a week? You know, is there space in the bathroom cabinet for him or her to have their items of toiletries, you know, their sleepover stuff? And sometimes that awareness has not even, you know, occurred, that if you want to have something into your life, you need to make the space for it.
Yeah, that's it's, when you put it like that as well, it seems, well, it's a lovely way to picture it, because and then when people get that, maybe it's simple when you think of it that way. You know, when it's very, very simple and clear to think, well, of course you're not going to have space in your life for this new relationship or anything, because there's too much stuff in the way. So
yeah.
Moving on then to, so if people are, you know, I'm sure there's plenty of people that are listening to this that have, you know, have read the Marie Kondo books, and they follow like the guys like the minimalist guys, or Joshua Becker in America. You know, these people who have kind of really carved out a great career for themselves, but because they're of this time now where it's a real need and a necessity for people to be doing this. What other resources maybe could you point people towards if they were either looking to get started to do some decluttering, or whether, you know, they've done it for quite a bit but maybe they need a new fresh bit of inspiration?
Yeah, I think some of the kind of books that I read a long time ago, I've revisited, like E Squared by Pam Grout, and it's about like energy. I think it's like 8 or 9 energy experiments that you can do to kind of like make a shift. I think making a list, it sounds really, really simple, but making a list of just some of your priorities, even if they're pipeline dreams, making a list, and then also kind of creating a mood sort of vision board of, you know, hopes and plans and things that, you know, it could be something you've read, a picture in a magazine, or an aspiration of something, and kind of like get it sort of in front of you, so that it's maybe something that you look at each morning, you know, while you're waiting for the kettle to boil. So it's like reaffirming and having kind of like a vision, which in turn creates a feeling inside of you of a plan and a motivation. I belong to a place called, well, not belong. I go to a place called Alternatives, which is a kind of a space where speakers come and kind of talk about stuff that's happening in the world. It's of a sort of spiritual theme, but it's a really good place to kind of open your eyes and ears up to, you know, what other people are doing, and, you know, it's very interesting. There's lots of resources that I've found that have come through going to Alternatives, which is on a Monday night in St James's Church in Piccadilly. So if you're London based, that's, you know, a great place to kind of connect with different people. There's always a lot of sort of talks on holistic approaches. sort of looking at the whole kind of whole self, whole mandala of where you sit in, you know, in your own life.
Just that alternatives, is that just London based, or is it go beyond that?
It's just London based as far as I'm aware, but they do have, apart from the Monday night talks, they have, they advertise on their website different workshops in and around the country, and it's an international organisation, so they have speakers come from all over the world, and sometimes they run courses in other places apart from in London.
That's good to know. That sounds interesting. And what about for people who would actually want to, you know, are really fascinated with decluttering? Maybe they've seen the benefits massively in their life, and then they want to step up and maybe become, you know, do it professionally in some way, like what you're doing. How would someone go about that?
Yeah, there's a really a fantastic organisation which I'm an accredited member of. It's APDO, Association of Professional Declutterers and Organisers, and the membership has increased hugely in the last couple of years, since the emergence of Marie Kondo, and there's certainly a place for consultants of the Marie Kondo technique. There is also a controversy for amongst some of the members of APDO who are working specifically with people with hoarding behaviours, because of the kind of the ignoring of kind of the emotional and the mental attachment to clutter. So, you know, there's the Marie Kondo way of organising. I can really relate to some of the aspects which she's really brought to the kind of forefront, and people saying, you know, some time ago, is there any such thing as a declutterer? You know, is that an actual job? And APDO, I think we're 300 members or maybe more now strong, and so finding the APDO website and then being able to train as the professional organizer. There is workshops and training. I think they're 1 and 2 days, and they are actually run in different parts of the country. I think there was one in Birmingham in March, and then I think there was one in Manchester in June. And so, and also for people that are interested, they can go on to APDO, and they can look up a personal organizer in their area. They can have a mentoring call. There's a couple of members that offer mentoring calls. Like, you know, do you think this is something that you might want to do? And what's been your experience so far of your own clutter, maybe your own personal sort of journey with clutter. My kind of future sort of vision for my own work is that I would really like to have create a charity that's linked to the clutter that my clients are really happy to let go of and donate. So I'd like a charity that the donations were specifically helping people with mental health issues. I'd probably say that I would like to help maybe younger people, maybe sort of 16 to 25-year-old young person who's kind of maybe struggling with where to go next, and maybe getting a kind of an organized sort of plan of their life in place. So I think a charity for me would be one of my future plans. A pipeline dream has been, I've been trying to get a book together for a really long time. I have got so much information to go in it, but I'm not a writer, so I was almost there in terms of signing up a book agent, but it didn't quite happen. So I personally would really like to have some kind of support and help to get that into print and to get that published. And also to complete my training. I think that, completing the kind of psychology behind clutter, it's almost like clutterology. It's very much the psychology behind clutter is really the root cause of kind of shifting that energy, shifting that clutter.
Yeah, well, that sounds really fascinating. You got a book in the works, and you sound like you've got a really full life, but a full life in, one that is, it's feeding your soul. It's not feeling like you're being pulled in one direction. You're not feeling like it's out of control and you're just keeping up with the Joneses. Instead, you're carving out your own life because something that feels, right for you. So it's been really nice to hear your story, because, I first came across it in that article that I think you mentioned at the beginning. And, you had this lovely home and this life that, well, from the outside, it appeared to like everything was together, and you've been able to, get to the root cause of things and to unpick it, and then to shape a life that is, is rich for you. So it's been really nice chatting to you. I'd just like to finish maybe just with one last question, which I like to ask all my guests. So, this podcast is all about sharing what good people are doing. And I definitely believe that you're doing some real good out there to helping people to let go of a lot of stuff they've been holding on to physically and emotionally. But what advice would you give to someone who is looking to go out there and do their own bit of good in the world?
I think you have to know yourself. I think it's about really trying to be transparent with yourself and find your truth, and tick your own boxes, and find out what in you do you think that you can naturally give, that stays true to yourself, but is aligned with your true values. I think making your environment as clear as you can, so that you've got the ability to have clarity about what your mission is. What is your purpose, what is your mission? So removing the kind of distractions and the obligations and the commitments and I have to do this. I mean, one of the things which a book that I recently came across, of which I would really recommend everybody having a read of, is it's called Why Love Matters, and it's by a lady. The author is Sue Gerhardt, and it really is a good example of why does love matter. When we love doing something, what comes of that, and how do we transmit that into what we do in terms of our work and our relationships, and and getting that out to the world. The turning your kind of passion into profit is when there's a fair exchange between what you've got to give and how you can reach out and how that can be received. That would be my kind of spiritual advice.
That sounds amazing. That's good advice for me as well. And I'm sure it's for the people listening to it. So how can people connect with you? What's the best way if either they want to just check out more of what you're doing, or potentially they want to have you on as a decluttering consultant for them?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, Rob. So I have a website. It's www.unclutteryourlife.co.uk. There's free resources on there and inspirations. You can read about my media coverage, and you can set up a telephone consultation, and you can my phone number's on there. You can directly book an appointment with me on there's a link there for a piece of software called lessismore, which is just setting up appointments. So it's accessible in terms of if it's midnight and you get a feeling of I just want to kind of, I've made the decision that I want to do something. You can log on. There's a calendar. You can book an appointment to either see me in person or speak to me on the phone.
That sounds great.
And I am a member of APDO. I'm accredited member of those people who, like me, we're all members of an accredited organisation to help.
Brilliant. Well, that seems like a great way to wrap up. I've really enjoyed talking to you today and hearing about it all. It's been really, this is something that I'm very passionate about, and I'm sure plenty of our listeners will enjoy it as well. So thank you.
There we have it, guys. There's today's episode wrapped up with Julieanne. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. It certainly inspired me to declutter a bit more, even though I've done it many times, but it can still kind of like build up. And what really helped me, actually, it helped me to finish off a few projects which I had been meaning to do, a few house chores, a few different things that I'd sort of started and I just left to one side, but even though they've been playing on my mind. So thank you, Julieanne, for that, and for and hopefully inspire many people in there. Check out the show notes, guys. All the book recommendations that Julieanne spoke about are in there on the website. So yeah, until next time, have a good one.